We start the footage at the Mallard Road depot, home base of the trolley bus system in its later years, and we managed to catch a glimpse of all three main generations of Bournemouth trolley bus, albeit the earliest one, we shall see in a moment, having lost its roof. Vehicle in the foreground here, a 1950 BUT six-wheeler, one of 24 similar vehicles delivered in that year. Behind, number 202, a 1934 Sunbeam MS2, with its roof being typical of 103 vehicles delivered between 1934 and 1936. Behind, the newest trolley bus on the system, and the last trolley bus built for a British operator, number 301 LJ, the 39th vehicle in a batch of 40 delivered to the corporation between 1958 and 1962. This particular film was shot at the time of an enthusiast tour. A party from the London Omnibus Traction Society, which had come down in two preserved RT class vehicles, and for the occasion we're using the open top trolley bus and the last new Sunbeam in the fleet. Pick up the open topper here down at Bournemouth Pier. The overhead wiring down here was not normally energised and not normally used. Last regular services have been in the summer season of 1965, but the overhead was retained for possible emergency use as an alternative town centre terminal point in emergencies. Normally a highlight of the enthusiast tours, the largely disused overhead was likely to provide some pretty spectacular fireworks, not least because of the corrosive effect of the salt air. You may notice down at Bournemouth Pier in this and subsequent shots the traction poles were painted white, said to have been an effort to make them a little less conspicuous. Whether that actually works is perhaps a matter for the individual. 301 heads there across the entrance to the pleasure gardens and climbs Bath Road away from Bournemouth Pier. In 1993, this particular section of roadway is one of the parts of the route selected by the Borough Council for a new trolley bus installation. Number 202 there heading up Exeter Road, and we find ourselves at a terminal point known as Cardiff Avenue near Tuckton Bridge, and then at the famous Christchurch turntable. The narrow High Street gave rise to some consideration when trolley buses first ran into Christchurch of how to turn them, and the solution was found here in the turntable. Fare-paying passengers in normal service vehicles were not allowed to sit on board while the vehicle was turned, so this was a particular treat for enthusiasts. All three generations of the Bournemouth trolley bus system lined up at Mallard Road for a photographic opportunity. And nowadays what would be a vintage Leyland Atlantean sitting there on the steam cleaning ramp. One of the RT class vehicles is brought alongside the trolleys for photographic purposes. And an unusual RTW Leyland comes up alongside as well. The RT class, of course, still had some 12 years of active service ahead of it in London at the time of this photograph. Unusual event, the breaking down of a trolley bus, little wartime former double-decker bus, Sky Arab utility there, towing in one of the Sunbeam MF2Bs. We pick up the open topper, or slightly earlier enthusiast tour here, taken in 1965, still owned by the corporation and about to pass into preservation with the National Trolley Bus Association. 202 is shown at the Triangle terminal point, where the side road services ran until 1966. Side road services was the term given to the trolley bus routes that climbed Richmond Hill and headed towards Charminster and Winton and Moordown. Main road services headed towards Boscombe, Eyford, Southbourne and Christchurch. And here we are on the side roads, 5 ways on the Charminster Road route. A turning circle facility existed here for many years and saw occasional peak hour use. An MF2B there of the 1959 batch heads off towards Castle Lane. And we descend Richmond Hill looking left up Jervis Place and through the Pleasure Gardens there towards Bournemouth Pier. And it's time for a break in Avenue Road. Now during the Wallerstone services, heading here along Columbia Road and up to the top of Columbia Road on Kinston Road, where a full turning circle existed for the services 30 and 31. The two services approach the turning facility from opposite directions, and at certain periods in the system's development, the two services operated as circulars, and the turning facility there fell into periods of disuse. Quite likely that Trolleybus 202 in its open top form was making a first and probably last visit to many parts of the system. We see it on here. This was way off the normal seafront services that it had been confined to in later years. Two trolleybus reversers survived into the 60s on the Bournemouth system. This one is at Redhill Crescent at Moordown and was more or less opposite the trolleybus depot at the location. By this time the depot was being used by the GPO. Return to the main road and cross over Tuckton Bridge, heading out of Bournemouth and into Christchurch. Built as a toll bridge, this was largely constructed at the inspiration of the tramways department, who required to run to Christchurch. Now we rejoin the Cardiff Avenue turning facility, another comprehensive layout allowing trolleybuses to do a complete 180s turn from either direction. This facility fell into complete disuse in later years when a roundabout was built just 150 yards down the road at Tuckton and provided for any need to turn vehicles. dewirement there being evidence of its normal idleness. Sign there on the left-hand side, prohibiting trolleybuses from passing on the bridge. Rather overtaken by events, the 8-foot wide rolling stock delivered in the post-war period would probably been fairly lucky to have passed on the bridge at all, even if it had tried. 202 heads here back into Bournemouth, past the Tuckton Tea Gardens on the right. And there we see an MF2B, 1959 batch heading towards Christchurch on service 21. The structure the trolley booms are mounted on there survives from the original vehicle. It wasn't specially built. And into Christchurch High Street, and inevitably then heading for the turntable. Just see the handbrake there. This was removed in later years. It was designed to bring the turntable to a halt at the appropriate time and allow the trolleybus to proceed in the opposite direction. In 1993, that turntable still survives on the location seen here, but is surrounded by small shops and warehouse developments, it being only possible to get a small car actually onto the turntable nowadays. Part of the Priory there in the background. And a colourful roundabout in Christchurch at Stair Road. We then make our way towards Iford and Jumpers. And there on the Jumpers turning loop is an MF2B. Boscombe High Street, fully pedestrianised in 1992. And a brand new convertible Daimler Fleet line there on the right. Some of those were to end their careers in London, oddly enough, with London Transport. BUT 6-wheeler, following it down Old Christchurch Road here. Making a turn at the wartime facility known as Horseshoe Common turning. Never used by scheduled service trolleybuses. This particular facility saw a lot greater use in its last couple of years, as it became a must on any enthusiast tour. An MF2B heading out of Old Christchurch Road, lower section and up towards the Lansdowne, and a BUT follows the one-way system into Firvale Road. We're back at the triangle, the line up there of trolleybuses all waiting to head off up Richmond Hill and along the side roads. Mixture of BUT and MF2B. And just outside the college on the main Christchurch Road at the Lansdowne. Here it is on the left-hand side. And we head now away from Folkestone on the main road, out of Boscombe, back towards the Iford Jumpers section of route. Here we are, the Jumpers turning facility shared by now with motor buses, and over the main Waterloo-Bournemouth railway line, with Christchurch Station on our left-hand side, into Christchurch High Street. Special traffic signal was in place here, energised by the trolley booms passing through a skate on the overhead, and that prevented two trolleybuses entering the narrow section of the high street and finding each other on the turntable. Back here at Mallard Road depot, some of the BUT six-wheelers and a rather unfortunate MF2B. And a wet day back at Bournemouth Pier. By now the open topper is running as a privately preserved vehicle, and so is KLJ 346 running as a preserved vehicle. This is the only survivor by now of the 24 BUTs, the majority of which went to the scrapyard in 1966. One other preserved Bournemouth trolley bus made up the trio for the closure ceremony when it was brought back by the Reading Transport Society and undertook tours of the surviving main road routes. This 1934 Sunbeam was largely still in original condition, unlike its sister 202, and obviously retained its roof. We pick it up on a cold February morning heading towards Tuckton Bridge, and we'll watch it demonstrate the turning facilities mentioned earlier that rendered the Cardiff Avenue loop as redundant. Driver's eye view taken in one of the Sunbeam MF2Bs, and usually for trolley buses, of course, the layout here at the front is very reminiscent of contemporary motor buses. It could certainly arguably have been adapted to allow for one-man operation. Rather unfortunate feature in later years was the desire to play to the audience with dewiring trolley buses, something which might have been entertaining at the time, but perhaps for those more seriously interested in the vehicle as a mode of transport, it certainly didn't do it any favours. We return to Capri Avenue with the old Sunbeam. Pretty well laden there. The twin entrance exit layout being very clearly seen there. A feature that was to be included on all native Bournemouth trolley buses from the original 100 through the BUTs right up until the last deliveries of Sunbeam MF2B in 1962. The only exceptions to this rule were a small batch of ex-Brighton BUTs which ran on the system fairly briefly from 1958 to 1965. Sunbeam makes its way towards the Christchurch turntable. Of course, the motor buses were not affected by the traffic signals controlled by the trolleys, so in later years, as the frequency of motor bus operation increased, difficulties often arose in the narrow section of the High Street there, and 212 heads into the Christchurch turntable. In 1993, this trolley bus is displayed at Sandtoft Transport Museum and has been superficially restored to its original 1934 condition in a far more elaborate livery than you see it there. Another turning facility is demonstrated to the enthusiasts. This one at Southbourne Crossroads. Again disused in later years. This did see quite a bit of service at one time, with peak hour summer services terminating here. The building in the centre of the turning circle is a public convenience. And the surface trolleybuses joins the photographic opportunity there. Condition imposed upon organisers of these tours was the need to allow service trolleybuses to pass at any time. And in a moment we'll see number 212 being disconnected from the wires to allow the fare-paying bus to continue. And then in the wintry sunshine, we arrive at Bournemouth Pier. They're heading off towards Bath Road. A quick look across the bay with the Isle of Wight there in the background, and the municipal swimming baths. Coming right up to the end of the system, we now see the bus stop that was specially erected here for the last week and restored service trolleybus operation to Bournemouth Pier for its last week. These trolleybuses operated hourly from the pier to Mallard Road depot and conveyed enthusiasts and the public to a special display which was laid on at the Mallard Road canteen and to a line-up of the preserved trolleybuses outside. Both the Pavilion Theatre there in the background, the Palace Court Hotel, survive in much this form today. The rather battered and neglected condition of the trolleybus that you can clearly see there is sadly now fairly typical of the fleet as it works out its last few days. Climbing away up Exeter Road. And entering Bournemouth Square. Rather unusually here, trolleybus enters the square from the left-hand side. This would be one of only 3 vehicles normally parked off-peak on the former side road's terminal wiring. Another section of wiring that effectively was put back into regular service use was the depot-only wiring from Eyford to Castle Lane, which had been part of the side road service 32 up until 1966. Here the trolleybus negotiates Cooperdene roundabout, location now covered by a massive flyover. Scrap trolleybuses, the oldest of them being barely 10 years old, and a line-up of the preserved vehicles. At that time numbered 202, 246 and 212. The Mallard Road depot premises were particularly spacious, and at this time still relatively modern. They were built really for a fleet of trolleybuses, had to be adapted after only a few years' use to serve the changeover to diesel buses. And the exhibition trolleybus there entering Iford roundabout, making its way back towards Bournemouth Pier. Flower baskets on the traction poles, quite a typical feature of the system. The trolleybus arrives back at Bournemouth Pier alongside the municipal baths. Disused overhead there leading down and up the Richmond Hill. A lasting memory for many people of the Bournemouth system was the sight and indeed lack of sound as 70 passengers were conveyed on a trolleybus up this hill, accelerating at quite an alarming rate. Interestingly, the replacement motorbus routes were often diverted to take them up more gentle inclines, as several failures occurred just after the trolleybuses were withdrawn on the Richmond Hill. Here we have trolleybuses climbing out of the town up Old Christchurch Road, and we go back over to the Tuckton side of the system, and then head in back via Boscombe Gardens, catch a glimpse of the decorated trolleybus, number 278 of 1958. And we watch a trolleybus from the Pleasure Gardens. The clock tower there is the centrepiece of the town centre roundabout, which survives from the days of a tram station. Some shots here of the trolleybuses going over the toll bridge at Christchurch, or former toll bridge at Christchurch. Advertisements were added to the trolleybuses in the last 18 months of the system's existence. The Town Council having reluctantly agreed that such commercialism was ultimately necessary for revenue purposes. The bridge structure here is made up in part by tram tracks, as they were one of the original reasons for its construction. This can still be clearly seen even today, but only by passing under the bridge, not over it. Another one of the peak hour vehicles pulling out of the old side roads terminus at the Triangle and heading back into service on the main road. An MFTB outside Debenhams makes its way around the town centre. We see one of the exhibition trolleybuses there in Castle Lane. A lot of new overhead had to be erected here in the very last months of the system, as new road layouts were being built. Passing over the Waterloo-Bournemouth railway line, with a glimpse of the decorated vehicle. And here we see it at night in all its glory. The light bulbs were supplied with current direct from the main traction supply at 550 volts. And you can see the driver there drawing current for traction purposes is dimming the bulbs. Back to daylight, and we're at the Lansdowne, the college there on the right hand side. A trolleybus heading there along the Bath Road, back towards Westover Road. Trolleybus is travelling inwards to Bournemouth Square at this point at an alternative of Old Christchurch Road, which we see here, to head down, or Bath Road. Those heading via Bath Road displayed a red via display on their destination screens to indicate the fact that they were travelling in that direction, and those via Old Christchurch Road displayed either a blue or black background stating that they were going via Old Christchurch Road. Scrap metal advert there, perhaps quite appropriate. That 6-year-old trolleybus was about to be converted into just such a thing. The overhead points obviously at this junction, and most of the other busy junctions were electrically controlled by the trolleybus driver, drawing or not drawing current at the appropriate time. Holdenhurst Road there immediately behind the trolleybus, the original trolleybus route that linked the main 3 railway stations, Boscombe, Central and West. That route closed in 1965. The white tape trolley boom ends there, a feature of the Bournemouth system, designed to make the trolleys more visible should the conductor need to bring them down. Glimpse there of the decorated trolley and one of the Alexander-bodied Atlanteans that were about to completely replace the last trolleys, passing by on the left. Last service day, 19th of April. Of course, the last day proper was the 20th. At 278, the decorated vehicle comes across the square, and rather a brave motor bus attempts Richmond Hill. Christchurch High Street, the other end of the system. Trolleybus is waiting for the signal from an oncoming vehicle before proceeding. Unfortunately, of course, the motor bus doesn't trigger that traffic control, and the inevitable problem then arises. preserved ex-Rotherham tower wagon. There are many unusual visitors to the system in its later weeks as enthusiasts came down for last rides and special tours. And we're in one of the modern MFTBs. Crossing here Tuckton Bridge, recognisable by the unusual traction poles and the roadway width. Heading in towards Christchurch here, in fact. We now go right up to the last day. This is the 20th of April. And a rather battered and bent trolleybus there is working its last hours, carrying the public around a special tour of the system. The replacing motorbuses also use the turntable from this day and continue to do so into the early 70s. Without the need to disconnect from overhead wiring, several of the regular drivers developed a skill for placing their motorbus on the turntable in such a way that the momentum threw the vehicle round and they drove straight off in the direction they wanted without leaving the driver's seat. Here we are back at Bournemouth Pier, loading bay for the last day tours. As can be seen there, very well patronised. Coming around Bournemouth Square roundabout. Jervis Place terminus on the right there, now completely devoid of trolleybuses. The motorbus had already taken over on that part of the roadway. General sense of carnival existed on this last day. Mixture of great sadness and perhaps a certain excitement at the unusual workings and general occasion. Passing Bournemouth College there on the right, heading out towards Boscombe. Something else that was to disappear with the trolleys. The old tea caddy there. The decorated trolleybus was much in evidence on the last day. Helped out on tours, and later became quite a significant vehicle in the final procession. The procession left Bournemouth Pier at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The last vehicle chosen was number 301, the last trolleybus delivered to Bournemouth and to any UK operator, and one which today survives with Bournemouth Heritage Transport. See the tours trolleys here still leaving the pier in the morning, many of the departures requiring several duplicate workings. Bournemouth International Centre is on the right there today, and by 2:30 the line-up had started. Preserved trolleybuses being in evidence there in the middle. These were technically hired to the corporation for the last day, so Bournemouth did have perhaps a unique situation where all three main generations of rolling stock were in use by the corporation in the last operating day. General public were invited to board these vehicles. Special souvenir tickets at 3 and 6pence were issued. One or two vehicles were reserved for particular groups, and the preserved vehicles were available at their owner's discretion to whomever they wished to invite. On number 297 here, this trolleybus was set aside by Bournemouth museums and carried a number of civic dignitaries. Here it is on Christchurch turntable, trying to undertake a turn the wrong way without very much success. 297 passed into the hands of Bournemouth museums, and today is with Bournemouth Heritage Transport, and has seen quite a lot of regular use on the Black Country Museum circuit, and has visited Sandtoft also. Traffic Superintendent Mr. Edwards, we can see there with his hat. The last 5 trolleybuses, with 301 there pulling up at the rear, went through to Christchurch, but because of the narrowness of the high street, the remainder of the public trolleys turned short at Eyford and headed into the depot. Outside the canteen, the special VIP trolleys, number 301, by this time just over 6 years old, is put into retirement. And we see a handful of the replacement Atlanteans. And we head now to Reading. We go back in time to July of 1968. And we find Bournemouth open top at 202, making a special guest appearance on the surviving Reading trolleybus route, by then due for imminent closure. Little preserved Bournemouth Bedford motorbus on the right there, also belonging to Bournemouth Heritage Transport. Gives a little bit of a Bournemouth flavour to the Reading streets. Surviving route between Tilehurst and Wokingham, the number 17, was all that by this time survived, other than depot wiring around Mill Lane. No bridges existed on the Bournemouth system, so fairly unusual sight, a Bournemouth trolleybus passing under a bridge. Another interesting little point not missed by the local press was the fact that 202 was actually older than the trolleybus system she was running on. Passing down a buses only lane, generally recognised that this particular lane, constructed largely because the trolleybuses couldn't be easily diverted around a one-way scheme, actually created the thought of bus lanes, which are quite common in towns and cities today. 202 heads into Mill Lane. The depot survives today on the same site, but a main road exists there right across the foreground into the main Reading High Street. The Reading system by this time had 2 main trolleybus models, the modern Sunbeam there represented by an F4A, and the 6-wheeler Sunbeams with Park Royal bodywork, which we will spot a little later on. 202 now moves to Roath Depot at Cardiff and takes part in a tour of the Cardiff System. This is in late 1969, by which time, of course, its home system had ceased to operate. Interlace point work and lightweight trolley heads generally create rather an un-Bournemouth-like appearance. And it has to be said the condition of the overhead perhaps equally reveals that we're not in Bournemouth now. Two makes a tour of the Welsh capital. Again, a feature of the Welsh capital, like Reading, was under bridges. Indeed, bridges form quite a problem for the Cardiff system. It's the surviving part of the system had its life curtailed by the declaration of one of the major bridges on the surface being unsafe. Interlace point work again. Coming much further up to date, 1977. Preserved and by now restored trolleybus 297. Still at her home Mallard Road depot. Looks a little uncanny as she pulls away under her own power, making use of the generator trailer you can see. This was by way of a trial operation. The generator had in fact come to Bournemouth behind the trolleybus on our left there, a preserved German vehicle which had been driven all the way from London under its own power. The purpose was to make sure that trolleybuses played an active role, in every sense of the word, in the 75th anniversary of Bournemouth's Corporation Transport Department. And here we see 202 being pursued by one of the convertible Daimler Fleet Line open toppers of 1965, complete with camera crew from Southern Television. A lineup of the trolleybuses there, various sponsors, Dennis Brothers, and F. English had volunteered to tow the trolleybuses around their former haunts. But obviously prize of the whole procession was the tram, number 85, newly restored and on loan from the Science Museum. The number 85 leaves Old Christchurch Road, followed by 202. 246, by now fully restored and back to her original number as 212, and a collection of preserved Bournemouth motor buses, all of which are now part of the Bournemouth Heritage Transport parent collection. Convertible Fleet Line, still belonging to the corporation, leads the procession down the East Overcliff Drive. Never a tram or a trolleybus route, so a little bit offline here for some of these vehicles. The well-informed local press reported that several of the buses had broken down and had to be towed. They were referring, of course, to the trolleybuses. A lot of these vehicles, of course, today are represented in the Heritage Transport Collection, but in this occasion they were representing the current fleet. Only that last Daimler Fleet Line passing now survives in 1993. Back at Mallard Road, and some visiting vintage vehicles there. Bournemouth's last trolleybus, number 301. line up in the main yard showing the various guest vehicles. 297 busy to Self all day, conveying passengers around the perimeter roadway. Of course, 1977 was Silver Jubilee year, so the inevitable silver buses turned up. Visiting vehicles there, Reading, Southampton, to name but two, 297. Makes our way around the depot. Jubilee Bristol VR. As can be seen there, the trolley bus caused quite a lot of interest. Lord Hanson Dorset open topper back in our hometown. London Routemaster. Portsmouth Tiger Cub, Southampton Guy Arab, Aldershot and District AC, Royal Blue Coach, London Country SDL, Bristol K, our London RF. Aldershot and District AC, Royal Blue Coach, London Country SDL, Bristol K, our London RF.